They say a working lighthouse draws ships to safety. I never imagined one would save us. When Danny was 4, we lost the apartment. Not dramatically, just the slow arithmetic of missed rent, temp work that dried up, and a landlord who'd shown mercy twice but not 3 times. We tried shelters. We tried my truck until it died on Route 7. We tried a cousin's garage until her husband made it clear we'd worn out even family charity. By the time Danny turned 6, we'd been sleeping in a borrowed tent behind a shuttered fish cannery, and I'd become an expert at making cereal with water taste like milk, at finding bathrooms that didn't lock at dusk, at pretending the rain drumming the nylon was just a lullaby. The lighthouse appeared on a Tuesday morning in March, half hidden in coastal scrub at the end of an overgrown service road. I'd been walking the shoreline looking for deposit bottles when I saw it. White tower streaked with rust, lens assembly still turning, solar panels bolted to a newer platform. The beam swept past every 8 seconds. Someone had abandoned it, but it hadn't abandoned itself. The door was unlocked. Inside smelled of brine, motor oil, and something warmer. Old wood holding on to decades of human presence. The spiral staircase creaked. Upstairs, the lamp room hummed. And in the watchroom, 1 level below the light, I found a cot, a camp stove, a stack of Coast Guard manuals, and a leather journal tied with fishing line. The first entry was dated 2019. Day 1 as relief keeper. Automated, yes, but someone should witness the light. I read until Danny called from outside, voice thin with cold. I descended and brought him in. He stared up the spiral, eyes wide. Is this ours? I didn't answer. I didn't know yet. But that night, we slept under a roof for the first time in 11 months, and when the light swept over us in the dark, I felt something I'd thought was extinct, the faint stirring of hope. Chapter 1. The door that wouldn't lock the real estate assessor's map, tacked to a corkboard in the harbor master's cluttered office, showed the lighthouse as decommissioned automated disputed title. I traced the notation with a finger while Danny sat outside on a bench eating the last granola bar. Disputed meant no one was paying attention. Decommissioned meant the Coast Guard had moved on. Automated meant the light ran itself. Solar panels feeding a LED lamp that required almost no maintenance. It also meant no one had changed the lock in 6 years. I pocketed the detail and left without asking permission. You don't get permission when you're 2 months from being invisible. You find cracks in the system, and you live there until someone notices. The lighthouse had been part of an old life-saving station. The main building had burned in the 80s. All that remained was the tower, a crumbling equipment shed, and a concrete pad where the boathouse once stood. Brambles choked the service road. The gate was down, chain rusted through. No tire tracks, no footprints but ours. That first week I kept the door cracked, listening for engines. None came. Danny and I moved in like refugees, 1 duffel bag between us, a plastic bin of clothes, and the tent that had been our last home. I set up in the watchroom, round, 10 feet across, with 4 windows facing the cardinal directions. The cot fit against the curve of the wall. The camp stove still had a half canister of propane. The journal sat on a metal shelf, spine cracked, pages swollen with salt air. I didn't read it yet. I was afraid it would tell me to leave. Instead, I explored. The lower level held storage, coils of rope, expired flares, a toolbox with half the sockets missing, painter's tape, a bent crowbar. The stairs were solid, but the handrail wobbled. Above, the lamp room was pristine, glass panels clean, the Fresnel lens rotating on bearings that barely whispered, the LED bright enough to sting when I looked too close. Danny climbed up one morning and pressed his palms to the glass. It's still doing its job, he said. I thought of the journal. Someone should witness the light. Yeah, I said. It is. That night wind rattled the windows and rain came sideways off the ocean. The roof didn't leak. The walls held. The light turned and turned, unbothered, as if time and weather had agreed to let this one thing stand. In the watchroom, I opened the journal. The keeper's name was Halliday. William Halliday, retired Coast Guard mechanic, 72 years old when he wrote the first entry. He'd taken the lighthouse as a project after his wife died, camping here off-season, keeping the lens polished even though the automation meant he didn't have to, recording weather, migrating birds, passing ships. He'd written every other day for 4 years. Then the entries stopped. The last one was dated November 2023. Storm coming. Betty would have loved this. One last turn before dark. The next page was blank. I closed the journal and looked out the north window. The light swept past a metronome of constancy. Somewhere William Halliday had stopped keeping watch, and somehow, the light had kept turning without him. Danny stirred on the cot. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy. Do we get to stay?" I didn't lie. For now. But now felt like a beginning. The question was, what had happened to Halliday, and did anyone know we were here? Chapter 2. The Agreement. No one signed. I found the paperwork 3 days later, stuffed in a manila folder between 2 Coast Guard circulars in the storage room. A handwritten note clipped to the front. Relief keeper agreement. Unofficial. No pay, no liability. Just keep her lit. The document underneath was a photocopy, countersigned by a district supervisor whose signature was illegible. It authorized Halliday to occupy the Lighthouse for maintenance observation purposes, effective 2019, renewable annually by mutual consent. The last renewal was dated 2022. No termination notice, no forwarding address for next of kin. He'd just stopped coming. I set the folder down and stared at the words. No pay, no liability. It wasn't a lease. It wasn't a deed. It was permission to exist in a bureaucratic blind spot, the kind that only worked if no one asked questions. I decided not to ask. Instead, I started working. The equipment shed was a ruin, roof sagging, door jammed half open, interior choked with rotted tarpaulins and rusted chains. Danny and I spent 2 mornings dragging the debris out, stacking salvageable metal on the concrete pad, hauling the rest to a ditch beyond the scrub line. Inside, we found a workbench still bolted to the wall, a vise with seized jaws, and a hand-crank drill press that looked older than me. I oiled the vise until it moved. It took 4 hours. Danny watched from the doorway, kicking at loose stones. "Why are we fixing this?" "Because it's fixable," I said. He didn't argue. At 6, he'd learned not to ask why we didn't have what other kids had. He just accepted the world we lived in, a place where fixing things mattered more than owning them. By the end of the first week, we had routines. I woke at dawn to check the light, bulb status, panel charge, lens rotation. Danny ate cereal with powdered milk I'd bought at the dollar store. We walked the service road to the highway, where a church van picked him up for school. I spent the day working, clearing brush, patching the shed roof with scraps of plywood and construction adhesive, cleaning the tower windows with newspaper and vinegar. In the afternoon, I read Halliday's journal. He'd been methodical. He recorded wind speed, barometric pressure, the names of ships he recognized passing offshore. He noted repairs, replacing a solar panel connector, recaulking window seals, scrubbing gull guano off the gallery rail. He wrote about Betty, his late wife, like she was still there, asking her opinion on whether to repaint the equipment shed or let it weather down to nothing. And he wrote about the lighthouse itself as if it were alive. "She's breathing easier tonight," one entry read. "Cleaned the vent grates. The air moves through her like it used to." Another. "The lens turned smooth this morning, no grinding, I think she remembers." I understood. The lighthouse had a presence, a rhythm, the creak of the stairs at certain temperatures, the way the light swept the walls of the watchroom every 8 seconds, casting shadows that climbed and fell like tides. The hum of the lamp motor barely audible but constant, like a heartbeat you only notice when it stops. Danny felt it too. One evening he pressed his ear to the wall. "It's talking," he said. "What's it saying?" He listened. Then, "Stay." I didn't tell him that wasn't how buildings worked, because maybe, in a way, it was. But staying required more than permission from a dead man's journal. It required money, and I didn't have any. The church that ran Danny's school offered day labor, landscaping, moving furniture, sorting donations. I took every job they posted. 5 hours earned $40 cash. $40 bought a week of food if I was careful. Careful meant rice, eggs, canned beans. It meant boiling water on the camp stove and washing dishes in a bucket. It meant no electricity, except what the solar panels gave us. Enough for the light, nothing extra. At night, we ate by lantern. Danny did homework at the metal shelf I'd cleaned and leveled. I read Halliday's journal and wondered what he'd left unfinished. Then, one afternoon, I found the compartment. It was hidden behind the cot, a section of wall paneling that didn't quite sit flush. I pried it with the crowbar and it popped free. A shallow niche 2 feet wide lined with oilcloth. Inside was a metal cash box. I opened it. No money. Instead, receipts. Dozens of them, bundled with rubber bands. Solar panel purchase, 2020. Lens cleaning supplies, 2021. Propane refills. Electrical connectors. Paint. Caulk. Every repair Halliday had made. Documented, dated, labeled, and beneath the receipts, A letter. The handwriting matched the journal. It was addressed to no one. If you're reading this, I didn't make it back, that's all right. I got 4 good years. The light's still turning because someone cared enough to keep it that way. Now it's your turn. The letter went on. Halliday explained the solar system, the bearing maintenance schedule, the emergency shutoff. He listed contacts, a hardware store that extended him credit, a marine electrician who'd helped rewire the panels, a woman at the Historical Society who'd wanted to landmark the lighthouse but couldn't get funding. The final line, "Don't let her go dark. She's the last one left." I folded the letter and put it back. Danny looked up from his math worksheet. "What did you find?" "Instructions," I said. He nodded, satisfied, and went back to fractions. I sat on the cot and stared at the receipts. Halliday had spent 4 years keeping a decommissioned lighthouse alive, out of his own pocket, for no reason except that it mattered. He'd documented everything, left a roadmap, and trusted that someone would follow it, that someone was me now. The question wasn't whether I had the right to stay. The question was whether I had the courage to finish what he'd started. Chapter 3. The name in the beam. The problem with invisible occupancy is that eventually, someone notices. Her name was Lorraine, and she worked for the county assessor's office. She arrived on a Thursday morning in a mud-splattered sedan, clipboard in hand, knocking on the lighthouse door like she expected someone to answer. I opened it halfway. She blinked. "Oh, you're actually here." "Yep." She consulted the clipboard. "I'm following up on a tax delinquency notice. This property is listed as abandoned." "It's not abandoned." "Are you the owner?" "I'm the keeper." She frowned. "There's no keeper listed. The lighthouse was decommissioned in 2018. The light's still on," I said. She glanced up at the tower, where the lamp assembly turned in the daylight, lens catching the sun. "I see that. But the Coast Guard doesn't maintain this anymore." "I know. So who are you?" I handed her Halliday's folder. She skimmed the relief keeper agreement, the renewals, the note about mutual consent. Her frown deepened. "This isn't legally binding. It was binding enough for 4 years. For Mr. Halliday, maybe, but he's—" She stopped, looked at me. "Where is Mr. Halliday?" "I don't know." That was true. The journal ended. The receipt stopped in November 2023. There was no forwarding address, no obituary, no note explaining where he'd gone or why. Just the compartment, the cash box, and the letter. The man had vanished, but the work remained. Lorraine chewed her pen. "You can't just move into county property." "Is it county property?" "The Coast Guard decommissioned it. No one's paying taxes, no one's claiming ownership. That doesn't make it yours." "I'm not claiming it's mine. I'm just keeping the light on." She stared at me. I could see her weighing the situation. A homeless man and his kids squatting in a structure no one wanted, performing a function no one required, legally murky, morally ambiguous, bureaucratically inconvenient. Finally, she sighed. "I'll make a note that the property is occupied and the light is operational, but you're on borrowed time. If someone files a claim, county, state, Coast Guard, private buyer, you're out. Understand?" "Understood." She left. I watched her sedan bounce down the service road, dust rising behind the tires. Danny appeared at the base of the stairs. "Are we in trouble?" "Not yet. What if we are? Then we'll deal with it." He accepted that. 6-year-olds are good at living in the present tense. But I couldn't stop thinking about Halliday. Where had he gone? And what happened in November 2023 that made him stop writing? I returned to the journal that night, reading the final entries more carefully. The weather observations became sparser. The notes about Betty more frequent. "She's been gone 2 years today." One entry read, "Still talking to her like she's in the next room." Another, "Saw a ship tonight that looked like the one we took to Alaska in '78. Probably wasn't. But I watched until it passed the horizon just in case." The last entry dated November 14th, 2023. "Storm coming. Betty would have loved this. One last turn before dark." The next morning I climbed to the gallery, the railed walkway circling the lamp room, and looked out at the ocean. The wind was strong, salt spray misting my face. From here, you could see 20 miles on a clear day. Ships, islands, the curved edge of the world. I walked the perimeter slowly, checking for damage. The railing was solid. The deck needed paint. The lens housing showed no cracks. Everything Halliday had maintained was still intact. Then I saw it, carved into the metal rail, worn smooth by weather. WH plus BH 2019. William and Betty Halliday. His first year here, the beginning of his vigil. I traced the letters with my thumb. Halliday hadn't kept the lighthouse operational out of duty or nostalgia. He'd done it as a memorial. Every polished lens, every replaced connector, every logged entry, it was all for Betty. The lighthouse was the last thing he could care for, the last thing that needed him, the last place she'd touched through his labor. And when he stopped coming, he'd left instructions for someone else to continue. I looked up at the turning lens. The light swept past, indifferent, eternal. Halliday had understood that the lighthouse didn't need to matter to the world. It just needed to matter to someone. Now it mattered to me. Danny called from below. "Dad, I found something." I descended carefully. He was in the storage room holding a metal tackle box he'd pried from under a shelf. Inside, hand tools. All clean, all oiled, all labeled with masking tape. Emergency kit. Use as needed. Beneath the tools, a folded topographic map of the coastline, marked with red X's. "What are the X's?" Danny asked. I studied the map. Each X corresponded to a lighthouse. Some were marked demolished. Others converted. A few said dark. Ours was the only one marked active. If you're enjoying this journey so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Chapter 4. Tools, Sweat, and Small Victories. The map became my evening study. I'd spread it on the metal shelf after Danny fell asleep, tracing the coastline with my finger, counting the X's, 23 lighthouses, 20 demolished, 2 converted to vacation rentals, 1, ours, still operational. It meant something. I didn't know what yet, but Halliday had documented the decline deliberately, like he was witnessing an extinction. I folded the map and returned it to the tackle box. Then I put the box on the shelf beside the journal. Halliday's archive. His inheritance. Work consumed the days. I'd learned that keeping a lighthouse meant more than checking the lamp. It meant tending the 100 small failures that time inflicted. Rust, rot, salt corrosion, gaps where weather got in. I started with the windows. The watchroom had 4, each divided into 9 panes. 3 panes were cracked, sealed with duct tape that had petrified. I measured them carefully, wrote down the dimensions, and walked 3 miles to the hardware store Halliday had listed in his letter. The owner recognized the address. "You at the old lighthouse?" "Yeah." He studied me. "You know Halliday?" I found his journal. "He dead?" "I don't know." The owner nodded slowly, like this made sense. He was a good customer. Always paid, even if it took a few weeks. "What do you need?" I showed him the measurements. He cut the glass while I waited, wrapped each pane in newspaper, put them in a box with glazier's points and putty. $42. I had 38. He looked at the bills in my hand, then at me. "Halliday used to run me credit. I'll extend the same. Pay me when you can." I paid him the 38. "I'll bring the rest next week." He wrote it in a ledger, my name beside Halliday's. "You fixing the place up?" "Trying." "Good. Someone should." I carried the glass back, Danny walking beside me, balancing the box with both hands. We installed the panes together, me holding them in place, Danny pressing the glazier's points with a screwdriver. The putty smelled like linseed. It spread smooth, filling the gaps, sealing out the wind. When we finished, the watchroom felt warmer. Light came through clean. The cracks were gone. "It looks better," Danny said. It did, and that mattered more than I expected. The next project was the equipment shed. The roof sagged because the support beam had rotted through at one end. I jacked it up with the crowbar, wedged a cinder block underneath, and cut a new beam from a pallet I'd scavenged off the highway. It wasn't pretty, splintered, mismatched, too short by 3 inches, but I shimmed the gap with scraps and bolted the beam in place. The roof held. I patched the holes with tar paper and roofing nails. When it rained that night, the shed stayed dry. Danny stood in the doorway watching water sheet off the eaves. "You're good at this." I wasn't. I was learning. Every repair taught me something new. How to shim a gap, how to measure twice, how to make do with what existed. Halliday had done the same, I realized, working with marine surplus and hardware store scraps, improvising solutions because perfection wasn't available, and good enough was enough. The lamp assembly required maintenance, too. According to the journal, the bearings needed grease every 6 months. I checked the date. Last service was October 2023. I was 5 months overdue. I climbed to the lamp room with the tackle box. The bearing assembly was accessible through a panel in the base. I unscrewed it carefully, exposing the mechanism. A circular track, steel balls, a motor coupling. Everything was clean, but the grease had darkened. I wiped it down with a rag, applied fresh grease from a tube in the tackle box, and reassembled. The lens turned smoother. The hum quieted. I sat on the gallery afterward, watching the light sweep the ocean. It was late afternoon, the sun low, the beam visible as a pale ghost against the daylight. When night came, it would strengthen, reaching 20 miles, warning ships away from the rocks. Halliday had done this every 6 months for 4 years. I'd just done it once. It felt like passing a test I hadn't known I was taking. Back in the watchroom, I updated the journal. I'd started my own entries beneath Halliday's final one, documenting repairs, expenses, Danny's progress in school. It felt presumptuous at first, like I was writing in someone else's diary. But Halliday had left it for the next keeper. I was the next keeper. March 18, 2025. Replaced 3 window panes. Patched shed roof. Greased bearings. Danny learned fractions. Light operational. Simple. Factual. But permanent. A week later, a man arrived unannounced. He drove a pickup with contractor plates, walked to the lighthouse without knocking, and began photographing the tower. I came out. "Can I help you?" He turned. Mid-50s, work boots, clipboard. "I'm doing a property survey. You live here?" "I'm the keeper. Coast Guard contract. Relief keeper. Independent." He smirked. "That's not a thing. It was for 4 years." He glanced at the clipboard. "Property's been flagged for sale. County's looking to offload it. I'm assessing value." "Sale to who?" "Developer. They're buying up the coastline, old structures, cheap land. Usually they demo and build condos." My stomach dropped. "The lighthouse is operational." "Doesn't matter. It's not protected. Historical Society tried to landmark it, but they couldn't prove continuous use." He gestured at the tower. "Automated system doesn't count. Needs human occupancy. Someone's been occupying it since 2019. Not officially. And now it's vacant. I'm here." He looked at me, really looked, taking in the worn jacket, the secondhand boots, the careful exhaustion of someone living on the edge. "You're squatting." "I'm maintaining." He shook his head. "Won't matter. Sale goes through in 60 days. You'll need to vacate." He finished photographing and left. I stood in the tower shadow, hands shaking. 60 days, 2 months. Then what? Back to the tent? Back to shelters? Back to making cereal with water and pretending it was enough? Danny came out. What did he want? Just looking around. "Are we leaving?" "No." But I didn't know how to make that true. That night I read Halliday's journal from the beginning, searching for something I'd missed. A loophole. A contact. A trick. I found it on page 47. Spoke to a woman from the Historical Society today, Margaret Ellis. She wants to landmark the lighthouse, but the county says it needs proof of continuous operation. I told her I've been here every week for 2 years. She said I should document everything, repairs, expenses, log entries. Make a case that the lighthouse is still serving its purpose even if it's automated, that someone is still bearing witness. Halliday had been building a case, and he'd left me the evidence. Receipts, logs, the relief keeper agreement, everything documented. I just had to finish it. Chapter 5. The Ledger and the Storm. I found Margaret Ellis through the Historical Society's website, using the library computer on a Tuesday morning while Danny was in school. Her email was listed under Preservation Advocacy. I drafted a message carefully explaining who I was, how I'd found the lighthouse, and what I'd discovered in Halliday's journal. Her reply came that afternoon. "Can you meet Thursday at the lighthouse? I'd like to see the documentation." Thursday arrived cold and gray, wind gusting off the ocean. Margaret showed up in a station wagon loaded with file boxes. She was in her 60s, graying hair pulled back, practical boots. She shook my hand firmly. "You're the new keeper." "I'm trying to be." She looked up at the tower. William Halliday was a stubborn man. He kept this place going out of sheer will. I tried to help him get landmark status, but the county wouldn't budge. Too much liability, not enough tourism value. She turned to me. "You have his records?" I led her inside, up to the watchroom. I'd laid everything out on the metal shelf. The journal, the receipts, the relief keeper agreement, the tackle box, the map. She went through it methodically, taking notes, photographing pages. "This is good," she said. "Very good. Continuous documentation from 2019 to 2023, then you picking up in 2025. If I can prove the lighthouse has been actively maintained, not just automated, I can argue for emergency historic designation. Will that stop the sale? It'll delay it. Give me time to find funding, maybe get a preservation grant. But I need more than documents. I need proof that the lighthouse is still serving its original function. The light's operational. That's not enough. Automated systems don't count as active service. What made Halliday's case compelling was that he was physically present, bearing witness, responding to conditions. You need to show the same. How? She thought. Start a log. Record everything. Weather, ships, repairs. Document how the lighthouse interacts with the community. If a storm hits and the light guides someone to safety, log it. If you prevent damage, log it. Build a case that this place still matters. I nodded. I can do that. Good. And one more thing. She pulled a business card from her wallet. If anyone pressures you to leave, developer, county, Coast Guard, call me. Don't sign anything, don't agree to vacate, just call. She left, and I stood in the watchroom feeling the first stirrings of something I hadn't felt in years. Agency. The sense that I wasn't just surviving, but acting, building, defending. I started the log that night. March 20th, 2025. Wind 22 knots NE. Seas 6 to 8 feet. Light operational. Beam visible 18 miles. Checked bearing assembly. No issues. Observed fishing vessel pass at 2200 hours heading south. Danny watched me write. Why are you doing that? To prove we belong here. Do we? We're making it so. He nodded and returned to his homework. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. The light turned and turned. The storm hit 3 nights later. I'd been tracking it in the journal, noting the dropping pressure, the shifting wind. By evening, gusts were hitting 40 knots, rain coming horizontal, waves crashing against the rocks below the tower. The lighthouse groaned, not dangerously, but audibly, like an old ship flexing in heavy seas. I sent Danny to the cot with headphones and a book. Stay here, don't go upstairs. Why not? Just don't. I climbed to the lamp room. The glass shook in the frames. Spray misted the exterior, blurring the beam. I checked the seals, tightened a loose panel hinge, monitored the rotation. Everything held. Then the radio crackled. I'd found it in the storage room. A marine VHF. Battery dead. Antenna corroded. I'd cleaned it, replaced the battery, and left it on the shelf. It had been silent for weeks. Now it hissed with static and a faint voice. Taking water, position uncertain, need bearing. I grabbed the handset. Vessel in distress, this is Lighthouse Keeper at Beacon Point. Do you copy? Static. Then, copy Beacon Point. We're a fishing boat, 32 feet, taking water, navigation out. Can you give us a bearing? I looked out the north window. The ocean was black, rain obscuring everything beyond 100 yards. But the light was sweeping, steady, visible. I'm transmitting a continuous beam, I said. Bearing 085 degrees from your position if you're seeing the light. Follow it in. There's a sheltered cove a quarter-mile south of the tower. Copy. We see the light. Heading in. I stayed in the lamp room, watching. 10 minutes later I saw them, running lights low in the water, wallowing through the swells. They made the cove, dropped anchor, and went silent on the radio. I descended to the watchroom, soaked, shaking. Danny was sitting up. What happened? Someone needed help. We helped. I logged it. March 23rd, 2025. Storm. Wind 42 knots. Seas 12 feet. Fishing vessel in distress contacted via VHF. Provided bearing using lighthouse beam. Vessel reached safety. Light operational throughout. The next morning, the fishermen came to the lighthouse. 2 men, exhausted, carrying a cooler. We wanted to thank you. If we hadn't seen that light, they stopped. Looked at me. At the lighthouse. At Danny standing in the doorway. You're the keeper? Yeah. One of them opened the cooler. Fresh fish, packed in ice. This is for you. And we'll tell everyone. This light saved us. They did tell everyone. By the end of the week, Margaret called. I heard about the rescue. That's exactly what I needed. I'm filing the emergency historic designation today. It won't stop the sale, but it'll slow it down. How much time do we have? Maybe 3 months. Use it. I used it. I documented everything. Every ship that passed, every weather event, every repair. The log grew page after page, a record of continuous service. And in the evenings I read Halliday's journal again, looking for the one thing he hadn't documented. What happened in November 2023. Chapter 6. The photograph and the deadline. The developer's lawyer arrived on a Monday morning with an eviction notice. His name was printed at the bottom, Reeves and Associates, and the document was dense with legal language, but the conclusion was clear. The property had been sold to Coastal Development LLC. I had 30 days to vacate. Failure to comply would result in forcible removal. I read it twice. The sale already went through, pending final inspection. But yes, effectively closed. Margaret Ellis filed for historic designation, which is under review. Until it's approved, the sale stands. He handed me a second document. This is a waiver. Sign it and we'll give you 60 days and $2,000 to relocate. Refuse, and you get 30 days and nothing. I set the papers on the metal shelf. I'm not signing. He frowned. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I'm the lighthouse keeper. I have documentation going back to 2019. Documentation of squatting. Documentation of service. He picked up his briefcase. You have 30 days. After that, the county sheriff will remove you. He paused at the door. Look, I get it. You don't have anywhere else to go, but this property's worth $800,000. The developer's paying cash. The lighthouse is coming down whether you're here or not. He left. I stood in the silence, listening to the wind, the turning light, the creak of the stairs. Danny appeared. What did he say? We have 30 days. Then what? I didn't answer. I couldn't. That afternoon I walked to the library and called Margaret. The sale closed, they're evicting us. I know. I got the notice too. The county's pushing the designation review to expedite the sale. Can they do that? Technically, yes. But I'm filing an appeal. And I contacted a reporter, someone who covered Halliday's story a few years ago. If we can get public attention, it might pressure the county to slow down. 30 days isn't enough time. Then we make it enough. She was right. But pressure alone wouldn't save the lighthouse. I needed something more. Something that proved the lighthouse wasn't just maintained, but essential. I returned to the journal that night, rereading the final entries. Storm coming. Betty would have loved this. One last turn before dark. One last turn. Like he was preparing to leave. But why? And where did he go? I flipped back further, scanning earlier entries. Halliday had been meticulous. Every repair dated, every weather event logged. But starting in September 2023, the entries became shorter, less detailed. He'd stopped recording ship movements, stopped noting barometric pressure. The precision was gone. Then, in October, a single line. Doctor called. 6 months, maybe less. I stopped. Read it again. Halliday had been dying. I turned the pages slowly. The next entry. Told Margaret today. She wants me to move to hospice. I said no. This is where I'll finish. Another. Betty used to say the ocean was the best medicine. She was right. I'm not ready to leave her yet. And then the last one. Storm coming. Betty would have loved this. One last turn before dark. He'd stayed for the storm. He'd kept the light on one final time. And then, I closed the journal. Halliday hadn't abandoned the lighthouse. He'd died here or near here tending the light until he couldn't anymore. The lighthouse had been his vigil, his memorial, his final act of love. And now someone wanted to tear it down. I looked at Danny, asleep on the cot, his homework spread on the floor. He'd been here 2 months. In that time, he'd gained weight, stopped flinching at loud noises, started smiling when he talked about school. The lighthouse had given him safety, stability, a place where he didn't have to worry about where we'd sleep or whether I'd be there in the morning. It had given me something too, purpose, the sense that I was maintaining something that mattered, that my labor added to a legacy instead of just disappearing into survival's endless churn. I couldn't let it end. The next morning, I found the photograph. It was tucked in the back of the journal, pressed between the final pages. A Polaroid faded, showing a man and woman standing on the gallery. The man was tall, gray-haired, wearing a Coast Guard cap. The woman was smaller, smiling, hand resting on his shoulder. The ocean stretched behind them, vast and blue. On the back, in Halliday's handwriting, Betty and me, June 2019. First day as keeper. I stared at it. The lighthouse in the background, the light visible even in daylight, turning, and the two of them, together, beginning something they both knew wouldn't last. I turned the photo over. Beneath the caption, in smaller letters, "This is what we're keeping alive." That night, the reporter called. Margaret had given her my number. Her name was Carly, and she worked for the regional paper. I covered Halliday's story in 2021, she said. Historic lighthouse, old man keeping it going alone. It was a great piece. When Margaret told me someone new was there, I wanted to follow up. Can I visit? Sure. She came the next day with a camera. I showed her the tower, the journal, the receipts. I explained the relief keeper agreement, the continuous service, the storm rescue. She took notes, photographed everything. This is compelling, she said, but the developer's going to argue that automation makes human keepers obsolete. Automation can't make judgment calls, it can't respond to distress signals, it can't maintain the structure. Can you prove that? I showed her the log, the weather observations, the VHF transcript from the rescue, the repairs I'd documented. Halliday proved it for 4 years. I'm proving it now. She nodded. I'll run the story, but it won't stop the sale. I know. Then what's the goal? I looked up at the turning light. To finish what he started. The article ran 3 days later. Front page. Last lighthouse keeper fights to save Beacon Point. It included the photograph of Halliday and Betty, my story, and a quote from Margaret about the historic designation. The response was immediate. Letters to the editor, social media shares, a petition to delay the demolition, donations to the Historical Society. But the developer didn't budge, and 30 days became 20, then 10. If this restoration story has you hooked, hit like. It helps us bring more lost places back to life. Chapter 7. The Hollow Beam and the Hidden Truth. With 10 days left, I stopped counting. Counting made it real, made it finite. If I stopped, I could pretend the deadline was negotiable, that something would intervene, that the lighthouse would save itself the way it had saved the fishermen. But lighthouses don't save themselves. People do. I focused on work. The gallery railing needed paint. The salt air had stripped it to bare metal in places. I bought rust converter and primer with money from odd jobs, climbed up with a brush, and spent 2 days coating every inch. The wind was constant, the paint drying in uneven patches, but I kept going. Danny helped, holding the paint can, asking questions. Why does it matter if we're leaving? Because we're not leaving it worse than we found it. But if they're tearing it down, they haven't yet. He accepted that. We finished the railing together, and it gleamed in the afternoon light, silver and smooth, like the lighthouse was preparing for something. Margaret called that evening. The historic designation review is stalled. The county's claiming insufficient documentation of community benefit. I documented the rescue. One event isn't enough. They want proof of ongoing community value. Educational programs, public access, tourism. Things we don't have. What about the petition? 600 signatures. It's good, but not legally binding. She paused. I'm sorry. I thought we'd have more time. It's okay, I said, but it wasn't. That night I returned to the equipment shed. I'd cleared it, patched the roof, but I hadn't explored the back corner, a jumble of rotted boards and rusted chains I'd been putting off. Now, with nothing left to lose, I pulled it all out. Beneath the debris was a workbench heavier than the one I'd found earlier, with a solid top and deep drawers. I opened them one by one. The first held sandpaper, cracked and brittle. The second held chisels, dull but intact. The third was locked. I pried it open with the crowbar. Inside, a leather-bound ledger, smaller than the journal, wrapped in oilcloth. I carried it to the watchroom and opened it by lantern light. The first page was dated 1947. It was a keeper's log, an official one, predating automation, documenting the lighthouse's operation from 1947 to 1962. Each entry recorded weather, ships, maintenance, and something else. Visitors, families, children, school groups. The lighthouse had been a destination, a landmark, a point of connection. I flipped through the pages, scanning entries. May 3, 1953, hosted school group, 15 children. Explained lens operation. They stayed 2 hours. August 12, 1955, family reunion held on gallery. 23 people. Lighthouse visible from town. Several commented on its importance. October 7, 1958, storm. Provided refuge to stranded hikers. Light guided them in, stayed overnight. The lighthouse had been a hub, a working part of the community. Not just a navigation aid, but a place people came to, relied on, remembered. And then, in 1962, the final entry. Automation complete. Keeper duties terminated. Light to be monitored remotely. The next page was blank. I closed the ledger and stared at it. This was the proof Margaret needed. Continuous community benefit stretching back decades. Historical value tied to human presence. But it ended in 1962. Halliday's documentation started in 2019. There was a gap. 57 years where the lighthouse had been automated, empty, forgotten. I opened the ledger again, flipping through the blank pages. Then near the back I found it. A folded sheet of paper, yellowed, tucked against the spine. I unfolded it carefully. It was a letter, handwritten, dated June 1962, addressed to future keepers. I'm the last official keeper of Beacon Point Lighthouse. Automation has made my role obsolete, but the light will continue. If you're reading this, You've found your way here, as I did 30 years ago. The lighthouse doesn't need you to turn the light. Machines do that now. It needs you to bear witness, to remember, to ensure it doesn't become just another forgotten tower. The ocean is vast and indifferent. The light is small and faithful. Someone should watch over it, that's all. It was signed, Thomas Gray, Keeper, 1932-1962. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it and put it in my pocket. The next morning, I called Margaret. I found something. The original Keeper's log from 1947 to 1962. It documents community involvement, educational programs, public access. And there's a letter from the last official Keeper. Bring it to me. Now. I walked to her office in town, the ledger under my arm. She photocopied every page, photographed the letter, and spread the copies across her desk. This is significant, she said. It establishes historical continuity. The lighthouse wasn't just automated in 1962, it was abandoned. But Thomas Gray's letter frames that abandonment as a failure, and Halliday's work as a restoration of purpose. Will it be enough? It should be, but we're out of time. The demolition is scheduled for next week. Can you delay it? I can try, but you need to prepare for the possibility that we lose. I nodded, but I wasn't preparing to lose. I was preparing to fight. That afternoon, I climbed to the lamp room and stood on the gallery. The wind was calm, the ocean flat. The light turned slowly, casting its pale beam across the water. From here, I could see the town, small and distant, and the highway beyond, and the curve of the coast stretching south. I thought about Thomas Gray, standing here in 1962, watching the automation crew install the solar panels and motor drives, knowing his role was ending. I thought about Halliday standing here in 2019, deciding to stay when no one asked him to, keeping the light alive because Betty would have wanted it. And I thought about Danny asleep in the watchroom, trusting that I could make this work. The lighthouse had outlasted storms, salt, time, and neglect. It had outlasted Gray and Halliday. It would outlast me too, but maybe if I fought hard enough, it wouldn't have to. Chapter 8. The community gathers. The call came at dawn. Margaret's voice was tight, urgent. The demolition crew is coming today, 9 a.m. The developer pushed the timeline, said the designation appeal doesn't supersede the sale. Can you stop them? I'm trying, but I need time and we don't have it. Can you get to town? We're holding an emergency meeting at the library. If enough people show up, we can pressure the county to issue a temporary halt. I'll be there. I woke Danny, explained as much as I could. He didn't ask questions, just dressed quickly and followed me down the spiral stairs. We walked the service road to the highway, caught a church van heading into town. The library was packed. 50 people, maybe more, crammed into the community room. I recognized some: the hardware store owner, the fisherman from the storm, a teacher from Danny's school. Others were strangers, locals who'd read the article, signed the petition, or simply cared.